Namihinui kia koto katoa, ko Branka Vasilic toko ingoa. Dobrodošli. Welcome. This presentation is based on a study that used relational lens to explore collaborative practice. The slides will cover a brief study overview, the key ideas explored in this study, and how the study has led me to work further on developing those ideas in my current work with the Ministry of Education in New Zealand. The literature review highlighted two main points. It highlighted a gap between the evidence-based ideal and complex, messy reality of day-to-day practice. It also highlighted that relationships are important in collaborative practice but difficult to account for. So this study set out to pay attention to practitioners' contribution to collaboration as an attempt to bring research and practice-based evidence closer together. And the study set out to explore ways to pay attention to the process of relating by shifting the focus from individual action to co-action. So shifting the focus from individual action to co-action is the key idea in this study. It stems from Kenneth Gergen's concern with viewing individuals as the basic unit of society. Gergen illuminates how focusing on individuals and individual action fosters separation and open space for oppositions on all levels of social life. With shifting the focus to co-action, Gergen proposes to reposition ourselves towards each other in a way that views relationships as coming first. So this study paid attention to the process of relating as the beginning point for what we end up calling professional knowledge and community. Exploring the process of generating practices from this perspective highlighted a number of already valued but not well recognized and not well understood resources. As McNamee articulates, focusing on co-action helps us notice that we are different in every relationship. Therefore, every relationship becomes a set of resources we can tap into, and this study explored those resources with the aim of engaging with them more strategically. Here I will briefly introduce the participants and the context of the study. In New Zealand, the Ministries of Education, Health and Social Development together formed the High and Complex Needs Service. This service funds and provides supports for children and young people with the most complex needs in the country. With this service, young people identified as living with high and complex needs and their families are each assigned a team. So in this team meets regularly for a whole year and sometimes even longer, and typically includes school staff, social workers, health and other professionals, and of course the young person and their family. The teams are facilitated by HCN specialists. They are experienced practitioners with a background in often more than one of the related services, and those facilitators were invited to participate in this study because of their extensive experience in collaboration. The method used involved relationally attentive conversations with practitioners in the form of one-on-one conversations, narrative letters, and email exchanges. I first asked the practitioners to remember collaborative practices that stood out for them as successful and valued. After that, after each practitioner identified most valued practices, I introduced a relational lens in a diagram that I will share in the next slide. We then jointly explored relational processes that generated the practices they valued. In a nutshell, this was a theory-supported dialogue that was respectful to their current practice, in which relational practices were engaged with, afforded validity, and developed further. And in this way, this study demonstrated that relational orientation is already valued by experienced practitioners. What is missing in a shift in focus that will enable us to engage with those practices more strategically. So this is the diagram I shared with the practitioners. The left side describes the individual action-focused collaboration, and the right side of the diagram captures the relational lens. And this is based on the literature review and my ongoing conversations with the Taos communities. It is important to note, and it was in the study as well, to note to practitioners that neither side is right or wrong. They both highlight different aspects of teamwork. So for a highly funded government service, individual responsibility and individual accountability are important for good reasons, such as ensuring that funding is used efficiently and fairly. In this way of working, professionals are valued for bringing a set of specific individual skills and knowledge to the table, and role boundaries are important from this perspective. Typically, the teamwork starts with developing an agreement on what the key concerns are. This is then followed by developing a step-by-step plan detailing individual responsibilities and actions to be taken. The success of teamwork is measured based on the extent to which the plan has met predetermined outcomes. So this process is captured on the left side of the diagram. It is so integral to everyday practice to think that everything who we are as professionals sits in the mind, in the knowledge, in the skills that we accumulate over time and then bring to the table in teamwork as our contribution. This individual action-focused way of thinking places us at the outset of every professional relationship to value what makes us different from other professionals. So we tend to focus on what I can contribute that others cannot, and how is my understanding of the situation different from other professionals. And in this way, we risk missing what gets generated in relational process. Gergen, on the other hand, refers to knowledge as tradition to highlight the value saturation and communal origin of knowledge. From this perspective, there is no universally applicable knowledge or skills. Everything we do comes from a specific community of understanding, steeped in the values and concerns of that community. What that also means is that when communities of understanding intersect, new possibilities open. This positioning invites curiosity about what brings us together as professionals, rather than finding value in what sets us apart. Curiosity about other ways of understanding becomes more likely. Agreements are replaced with understanding where it is less important to make a point to understand each other and more important to come to share a common scenario for action. Understanding in this context requires a carefully tuned responsiveness in anticipating each other's actions in a way that invites further action. When understanding replaces agreements, strategies begin to emerge, and possibilities emerge that go well beyond predetermined outcomes. Participants in this study further developed this into their relational orientation. This exploration highlighted the success potential of a range of common and uncommon generative practices. Some practices, such as having small talk, being responsive, and positioning ourselves as more than the professional role, are considered common, although not sufficiently recognized as successful and valued strategies. Other practices only became visible through the relational lens. And here, appreciative exploration is a practice that stood out for me. It offers a way to understand the situations that are frequently set aside in the too hard basket in practice. It is best captured as Gergen's indicator of relational well-being, and here well-being refers to the well-being of relationship, not individuals. To illustrate what this means in practice, in one example, one of the practitioners in the study reported a big, complex meeting came to a halt when a young policeman talked about a mental health issue from a spiritual perspective. This practitioner reported that the team members simply did not know what to say next and didn't know how to move on with the meeting, until another team member responded by inviting an appreciative exploration of the ways in which the policeman's position was meaningful within that community of understanding. And in doing this team member validated the policeman's perspective as one of many. He did it in a way that helped the team's understanding, and this allowed the dialogue to continue and the team to move on together. In this way, appreciative exploration stands out for me because it is useful in situations where we encounter values and traditions that don't align with ours and we don't know how to respond. It seems increasingly important to learn how to enter conversations that tend to leave us speechless. It happens frequently in practice. It is often described as frustrations involving statements such as, there is nothing I can do about this, there is nothing I can do about this, therefore it's not my responsibility. From the relational stance, this is where efforts to preserve dialogue are most needed. And this brings us to school supports as relationally attentive practices. In New Zealand, the Ministry of Education is currently looking at how to shift away from having a number of siloed services, such as what we used to call severe behavior service, and have more locally responsive, more integrated supports that focus on early intervention and on school culture. The learning from doing the study makes me confident that relationally attuned practices have a lot to offer towards those aims. And it was impossible to fit everything I want to say into this presentation, so I reluctantly had to choose one example. And I chose Janela Bird's relational language making, which implies a space where individuality disappears. Although Bird talks about therapeutic context, in it I can see potentials for a more inclusive, collaborative meaning making related to school behavior supports. This practice is based on understanding that words attain meaning from specific ways of acting, thinking, and last but not least, relating. Bird talks about developing an environment where language use is explored. nurturing a sense of openness about what words mean, and finding the language people deem better for their relationship. To illustrate what this means, or what this might mean in relation to assigning meaning to behavior events, I will describe one classroom situation and one playground situation. The classroom situation involved a student hitting another student. The teacher talked about this event in terms of individual aggression that needs to be stopped, while the student, on the other hand, talked about hitting in terms of looking after a friend. They both wanted the hitting to stop. The teacher dismissed the student's description of the event as not relevant because it was just his perception. And then the teacher requested a specialist opinion on the meaning behind the behavior. And no attention was paid to the student's version of the event, and in the process overlooking ways in which it was more inviting to the student's engagement. From the relational perspective, an event requires more than understanding the student's needs, which is what our specialists tend to focus on. While the need driving the behavior may be important to understand, this will only provide one component of the story. Equally important is the process that brings all significantly involved to a shared understanding and to achieving a sense of shared responsibility. So in this example, a coaction attuned practice would consider the student's version of the event as a space for curiosity-led exploration and curiosity-led dialogue. The dialogue could focus on the most important constructive shared understanding of the behavior, where the purpose is to restore the relationship, not to get to the bottom of what is driving this behavior. Keskimetti and Winslade provide another example of the importance of paying attention to how meaning is talked into behavior events. For this, imagine a school playground with children playing when one boy pulls another boy's pants down. This event was then being talked into contradictory meanings by a teacher and the year dean. For the teacher who knew the student really well, pants pulling was just playful and innocent. For the year dean, who had more power in decision making, it was harmful and required urgent professional attention. A relational perspective would bring to attention in this situation that at this point in meaning making, important decisions are made regarding primary responsibility for both the problem and the solution. In this example, the year dean interpreted the event as harmful. This act had potentially significant consequences for the student and their whānau without consideration of their perspective at this point of assigning meaning to this event. This is important because when little attention is paid to joint meaning making and shared understanding, space opens for blame shifting. And when experts are viewed as holding the means of addressing the most difficult situations, the attitude of withholding the responsibility of others is implied and often encouraged, and that perpetuates the blame shifting practices. These and similar examples indicate the need for other more inclusive and more collaborative ways of generating and assigning meaning to events in schools. Emerson Lunn suggests that instead of only asking why a student did something, we consider why did this happen in our classroom or in our school. In this way, the problem and the responsibilities are shared. The shared responsibility shifts the attention from how to fix the problem, which in practice often means the child, to what is better for our relationships. In relationally oriented practice, professionals would not have been the first point of call for the meaning making behind the pens pulling. Relational orientation therefore suggests working on developing an environment where language use is explored and people find the language they deem better for whatever brings them together. A further challenge is to explore local practical implications of relationally attuned and oriented practices with the practitioners in learning support and school communities. Relational theory offers a practical tool to focus on the process of relating with paying attention to coaction. Being a government employee invites me to be curious about how the two ways of understanding language and understanding action and seeing the social world can coexist. It makes me interested in the differences as a connecting point. So I use this page as a practical way to invite dialogue on why we focus on individual action for specific reasons and why we need to focus on relational processes. From the relational position, the most important job for all of us is to ensure the potential for dialogue to continue, especially when that is most challenging. Thank you for listening.